Welcome back to Leatherheads Footy. I'm Morgan, and this is the Fantasy Forecast for round 9 of the 2022 AFL season. On this episode, I've got 5 value selections, and then I've got some rookie rankings for the guys that you want to bring into your team to keep generating that cash. So, first up, I've got Dane Zorko. He's a $261,000 mid-defender for the Lions, which means he's got a round 14 bye. Now, Dane is priced at 90 with that current price. Last year, he averaged 106, and he's been a consistent 100-plus scorer for his career. Ever since he was drafted as a mature-age rookie from the Gold Coast, his second year, he's been a really strong scorer, and he hits all of the stat lines, which I will get to later. He's 3% owned, which is relatively unique, and I think that he could be a pick that propels you up the overall rankings. The reason he's priced at 90 instead of those 100-plus scores that he has averaged over his career is he had an injury cloud coming into the season, he had an interrupted pre-season, and he's had 2 injury-affected low time-on-ground games so far this year. Under 20% time on ground, more like 65% actually. And when you adjust those low time on ground games that corresponded to low scores out of his season averages, he's averaging 108. So already you're not really needing much to happen, just those 2 injury affected games to not have happened, and he's averaging 108. That's 18 points value already, which is, you're getting a glimpse at why I like this guy so much. He's played 2 roles this year. Started out in defence, which was flagged over the preseason, playing very, very loose, getting a lot of switch kicks, particularly against Essendon. He scored 145, picked up a huge amount of marks. I think he might have even had 15 marks in that game. And he's also played a midfield role, particularly, I think, as he's building back into fitness. He might have started in defence because Coleman was out of round 1. It was flagged before the Coleman injury, but I think with his interrupted pre-season, maybe it's a slightly easier way to get himself rolling in the season while he's recovering from that Achilles injury, and then looking to move into the midfield later, because after Coleman's returned, the last 2 games, Zorko's had an increase in CBAs, and you've seen good scoring. But what I really like about him is that you've seen good scoring in both roles. So it's not really a concern. He's definitely best 22. And by the looks of things, no matter which role he plays, he's a really good scorer. So the last 2 rounds, the CBAs have been up to 33 and then 46% last week. Admittedly, last week against West Coast Eagles, and he scored like a 130. So I like that he's shown a 130 ceiling in both roles, and I like that he hits those marks and tackles. The Lions run over the next 6 games for inside mids is plus 7 points, which ranks him about 4th or 5th overall in the competition, which just means that on average, inside mids against the teams that the Lions are playing in the next 6 games have been averaging 0.7 points above their season average. So we like that. Even without that good run, I think he's still value, but that only adds to the point. Like I said before, hits his marks and his tackles. Hits his tackles when he's playing around the ball, hits his marks even more when he's playing in defence, when maybe those tackles drop off a little bit. He's in a really good team, second best team in the comp, you would say. He's a proven performer, and he's not going to get the tag with Neil out of the side. All this taken into consideration, I predict his average will be 105 from this point onwards. That's 15 points value, and that's comfortably a top 6 defender. Pushing on the door, knocking on the door, even if you say the saying correctly, of a top 3 defender, and he's at a heavily discounted price. So you can get 105 averaging defender priced at 90, which is awesome, and I think a move that you should make. It's probably the trade I'm going to make this week in Classic. The question marks on Zorko, and probably what's scaring people away, is his age. He's 33, and he had an interrupted pre-season with that Achilles. Keeping that in mind, he has only missed 3 games across the past 2 seasons, and I think I'm made more confident by the fact that the Brisbane Lions doctors were letting him play in games where he could have missed. The Lions didn't necessarily need him, but they were obviously confident that the Achilles injury wasn't going to get any worse. So they've played him. It looks like he's gotten over it. He's back in the midfield. He wouldn't be playing 50% centre bounces if he wasn't fit. So I really like that. I think that he's durable. This is probably the last season or second last season. Last season where I would
be picking a guy. When he gets to 34, yeah, it's starting to get a bit iffy, but I think Zorko, maybe late start to his career helps him a little bit. And he just seems like a guy that doesn't miss. And I've looked at stats and doesn't miss. It's not a vibe thing. Anyway, the verdict for Zorko is he's a really high reward pick. I like his ceiling. I like that he's shown his potential in both roles. He's definitely best 22. And I think that he will be a top 6 defender by the end of the year. Comes at moderate risk, just injury. I think injury is the only risk to him. I think it's a bold selection given his price. I think that will scare a lot of people away, but I think it's really good selection. And it's something that I will be doing this round. Stephen Cornelio with some DPP down to, or up to Dane Zorko. I think it costs 20k maybe to go between the two, but you can make that with a little rookie swap. Okay, next guy, might have got a glimpse at the third, but next guy is Taylor Adams, who's a $730,000 mid from the Magpies, which means he's got a round 14 buy. He's priced at 88, and last year he averaged 100. The year before that, he averaged 91 from memory in the shortened season, which was a really, really good score. I think that was top 8, actually, in 2020. He's a capable 100-plus scorer. Not consistent, though, but he has shown that ceiling. He had one huge year where he averaged 115 back in 2017 from memory. 100% owned, 1% owned, order of magnitude error. So pretty unique. He had an illness-affected start to the season, which is a bit different. Illness, but not COVID, apparently. Might have been COVID, actually. But he's built back from that. In the last 4 games, he's averaged 93 from 69 percent time on ground. If you adjust that out to his normal 76% time on ground, he's already averaging 102. So that's 14 points value, not asking for much to happen. I love that he's got a really safe midfield role. He's probably the first midfielder selected in that team to play inside. Magpies' inside mids run for the next 6 games is negative 0.7. A little bit on the lower side, but still pretty good. And Crisp has proved that there are points available in that midfield. Last game, he had very, very low marks and tackles. I think it was a total of 3 combined marks and tackles, which is a lot lower than he normally gets. He normally gets about 8 combined. So you can expect higher marks and tackles, and we know that that's where you get your really big bump in scores. So guys like Steele and Miller, they average very high, and Mills, which is why I like him, average very high marks and tackles. So you can expect last game a little bit of an outlier and expect higher scores moving forward. I predict his average to be 100, which is 12 points value. Nothing silly. I think it's pretty safe. Makes him a top 20 mid. So this is when it gets a little bit tricky. And with Zorko, with the defender status, you can be pretty safe to say if he stays on the park, he's going to be in the best possible team come the end of the year. I don't think Adams will be, but that's when you got to look at his price. Maybe he's a guy that you can ride through to the end of the buys. Maybe he's a guy that if you can get a rookie off your field going to Adams and you can't afford to go to one of the top 8 mids, that might be the thing, because you're probably still getting 30, 40 points on a rookie player. So he's not top 8, still value. Question marks at injury history. He's played 60 of the last 83 games over the last 4 seasons. So not great. Quick maths, he's played about 3/4 of the games. And 2022 was the only full season since 2017, which is ironic considering it wasn't a full season, but he did play all of the available games. Verdict is moderate reward, low risk. I still see him as a low risk guy, given his price and his history and his role. I think he's a value selection. I probably think of him as more of a mid-price guy than an underpriced premium, just with that ceiling, but you could go either way. He's probably an underpriced premium, realistically. Next up, Ollie Wines, just under $800,000. He's a mid for Port Power, meaning he has around 12 buy. He's priced at 95. Last year, in his Brownlow winning year, he averaged 112, 4% owned, so still pretty unique. Surprisingly, fantasy's interesting. There's a couple of guys that for whatever reason aren't popular. Maybe they don't play in an attractive style. Maybe they're not from Victorian clubs. Interesting, actually, side note. I looked at the winners of AFL Fantasy Classic over the last 10 years, and it doesn't say where they live, but it tells you the team that they supported. And I'm pretty sure every single one supported a WA team. So if that means that they also lived in WA, maybe getting an idea of how being outside the Victorian bubble and maybe getting some different press, getting a unique perspective to some extent of the players and not getting bombarded with the superstars and all of that stuff in the news, that can help you pick guys that sort of using your own logic and reason rather than getting sucked into the hype around some of the bigger names. And Ollie Wines is not necessarily a big name, won the Brownlow, a bit like Matt Priddis actually when he won. Just a really good player in a pretty good team. And that was a bit of a sidetrack. Anyway, he's priced at 95 because he was sick at the start of the year. Not COVID, he had like heart problems or something. Anyway, he was subbed out on 36. And if you take that game out of his average, he's averaging 105. So not asking for a whole heap to happen, just not get subbed out, and he's averaging 10 points on his price. Very safe midfield role. He'd be the first midfielder picked for Port Adelaide, and Port Power's run is plus 0.4 over the next 6 games. His last 3 average is 96, already not asking for much, and you've got value. He's building fitness, and that last game against Bulldogs was a really strange game. Very low scores. Top scores were 110, I think, from McRae and Boak. I wouldn't expect that. I think that there'll be more high-scoring fantasy games to come. I predict his average will be 105. So that's 10 points value. I think that puts him at a top 12 mid at this stage at a discounted price. Question marks, there honestly aren't that many with Wines. I think he's only priced low because of that game that he was subbed out. I don't think that'll affect him for the rest of the year. Question mark, maybe a bit of a Brownlow hangover, which is rumoured, apparently proved by stats. I haven't actually looked at it myself, and his ability to score when Port aren't doing so well. In the end, I think the verdict is that it's moderate reward. 10 points upside isn't heaps, but I think you're getting a guy that is good enough to be a keeper for the whole season and at very low risk. I'd be very surprised if Ollie Wines doesn't play the rest of the games and average over 100. Very, very surprised. So I think he's a safe selection. Moving on, Mitch Duncan. So we've gone from a safe one to a not so safe one. He's a $729,000 mid forward, so thrown in a forward. We've got a defender in Zorko, now forward in Duncan. He plays for the Cats, which means he's got around 13 buys, so keeping those buys and positions varied so that you guys can have an option for all of your lines. Priced at 87, last year averaged 100, and he's been a consistent 100-plus scorer, similar to Zorko. Kind of similar players in a way, except Duncan gets a lot more of his points from marks. 7% owned. A lot of hype going into the year. Personally, I was really high on him. I like the way that he plays, and with forward status, I thought he was a lock for top 6 forward. But as seems to be the case all the time with Duncan, he had an interrupted preseason, he missed round 1, and he had an unfavourable role. Cats are trying a few new things, Selwood on the way out, Dangerfield injured, and they're playing quick footy. They're not playing so much chip, but they're trying to move the footy fast. You saw that against Essendon where they destroyed them. Just going quick, playing on from marks, which was really good to watch. Anyway, Duncan scores mostly from uncontested marks. So playing on ball, which he was doing at the start of the season, doesn't suit him at all. He's not really a hard-nosed in and under player. He's a very classy player, but on the outside, he likes getting those uncontested possessions, and he uses the ball really well. Uses it well by hand, but a little bit better when he's in space and got a little bit more time, and he's a beautiful kick of the footy. Very similar kicking style to Tom Stewart. Not that it's related, but it's interesting that the two Geelong guys, probably their 2 best kicks, have a kicking style where they use a lot of body momentum, run through the footy. I think that's what people mean when they say kick through the footy. They run through the footy as they kick it. They don't use a lot of energy out of their legs. It's a lot from the body, very low ball drop, and as a result, very consistent kicks. Anyway, so round 6 and 7, he had about 50% CBAs, and he was playing on the wing when he wasn't in the centre bounces. He averaged 75. Now, round 8 is when the role change came, and this is why I'm interested in him. 0% CBAs and playing as a spare defender. He scored 124, keeping in mind that Tom Stewart, who I was just talking about, played a similar role the week before and scored 157. So if the Cats are looking to use this spare defender, and more than likely I'd say it would be Duncan over Stewart because they need Stewart to defend a little bit more. Duncan is not going to take intercept marks. So you can have him playing as that release kick, getting those +6s, uncontested marks to it, Stewart to it, playing more lockdown role. Question marks on Duncan are his age. He's 30, not quite 33 of Zorko, 30, and he does have an injury history. He's scarred some fantasy coaches in the past. He's got an uncertain role. This is the first time he's actually played that spare defender, and we're not sure how the Cats will go, whether they'll revert back to their chip game style or whether they'll keep playing fast and using those great forwards that have. Stengel playing really well. Brad Close, the computer, as Jarrod Healy calls him, always makes the right decision. Jeremy Cameron and Tom Hawkins. They would love it if they got it in quick, I'm sure. I think, though, being as classy as Duncan is, the Cats will want the ball in his hand, and I think he will keep this roll up. Verdict being high reward, very high reward. I think if he keeps this role, Duncan is a top 2 forward, and we thought that at the start of the year as well. Taranto, the only guy who could get close to him. I take it back, forgot about Dunkley. Top 3 forward for Duncan. The Dunks combining in the top 3. I think it's moderate risk, though. Injuries, a concern. Role, a concern. I think, like Zorko, bold selection. I think I'll be doing this one next week. Personally, I like to get in the guys with the really high ceilings, and particularly with forward or defender status, as is the case with Zorko and Duncan. They're guys that can comfortably be top 6 for their position. A little bit harder for the midfielders. Moving on, Jarrod Witts, we've got a ruckman. And the Suns co-captain, I'm pretty sure, with Miller. Good on him. Anyway, 5-year deal, surprised some. He's shown that it was well worth, and great recruit for the Suns. Anyway, plays for the Suns, as I said, round 13 bye. Round 13 bye, very interesting for the ruckman, because most people, particularly the top 100, are rolling with Gawn and Bruce, and Sam Hayes on the bench from Power. Gawn, round 14, Bruce, round 12, Hayes, round 12. So if you get either Bruce or Hayes, preferably Hayes, gains a bit of cash, down up, get him to Witts, you've got a ruckman for each round of the bye rounds. And you could just swap them in for matchups. He's priced at 83, which is a bargain, considering his last full season in 2019, he averaged 105. He then played 2020, didn't suit him, didn't have a great year. And 2021, he did his ACL in round 3, I think. He's been a consistent 90-plus scorer, but I think he's getting better and better. He's 11% owned, probably due to that discount after the ACL. And he's building back to fitness at the moment. 75% time on ground for the first 3. That's where the 3 came from. Averaging 78. And then 83% time on ground for the last 5, averaging 94. And in the last 3, he's averaged 100. He gets better. The Suns' ruck run for the next 6 games is plus 2.5%, which is the second best behind the Bulldogs. Interesting if English comes back. Keep that in mind. I predict he's going to average 100. I think he's getting better and better. His hitouts are massive. He gets like 45 hitouts a game, and then he's pretty good around the ground. He's not amazing, but he's good enough to add another 50 points on top of that. I think he's a potential top 2 ruck. I think it's Gawn. Ruling Grundy out for now. And then you've got Bruce, probably. And Darcy, if he can get going. Darcy, very injury prone over his career. Bruce, suspension prone, injury prone. We haven't really seen him do it consistently. So I think Witts is potentially the guy that'll end up being the number 2 ruck. Great buy. As I touched on, question marks are he's got a low ceiling. I don't think he'll go much higher than 110. Be surprised if he scored of 120. Maybe if he has a really cushy ruck matchup against a team. One of the many teams, it seems like, at the moment that aren't playing a ruck. But I think he's super consistent. Low ceiling, but high floor. Verdict is moderate reward. 100 average, what's that? 16 points value. Very low risk. I think he's a really safe selection and a good selection. If you don't have Bruce or Gawn, I reckon Witts is your man. Okay, now we're on to the rookies, which bit different format. As you can see, I've got a table instead of one player per slide. Still working on formats, how I'm going to do this. And I haven't put numbers next to them, but at the top is the rookies that I rank the highest, and at the bottom is the lowest. But the bottom, as we'll get to, is a bit of an exception. I put Darcy Cameron there because I wanted to talk about him and look at his potential. So top rookie is Greg Clark from the Weagles. By round 13, started on fire with an average, I guess it's an average, yeah. He scored 110 against Richmond and then missed with COVID, which was hilarious because everyone was going to try trade him in. Obviously not funny there. I don't need to apologise for that. Anyway, priced at 250, which is still very good. Makes his priced at points 30. He averaged 100 in the VFL. That's coming back from an injury too, or waffle, not VFL, in the seconds. His job security is really high. I predict he averages 75 from this point onwards, which will take him to about $630,000 with a profit of $380,000, which is huge. So if you don't have him, get him in your team ASAP. Second on the rookie rankings is Robbie Mccoomb from the Bulldogs. Again, a midfielder, 313k, which means he's priced at 37. He's averaging 62. I think he went 50, 80, 50. Keeping in mind the last 50, he had 3 free kicks against, I think. So, and it was that weird game that I spoke of against Port. So I would expect him to score higher than that. He's playing on the wing. Admittedly, probably not his preferred position. He'd prefer to be an inside mid, but Bulldogs have heaps of them. I think his job security is high. It'd be interesting when Lachie Hunter comes back. He's listed as to be confirmed on the injury list, so hard to get a bit of a gauge, but I think he's got the second best scoring potential behind Clark. I've got his predicted average at 70, which means he'll get up to 586k and earn you a cool $270,000. Third on the rookie rankings, I have Jack Carroll from Carlton. He's a midfielder, kind of the opposite to McComb. I think he's a guy that probably would thrive on the outside, playing wing or flank, but he's been playing a little bit of centre bounce. He actually hasn't been playing that much centre bounce, so he's probably in a decent position for him. But Carlton's wings are pretty settled, so I think he's playing forward flank with a little bit of on-ball time. 284k, priced at 34, averaging 71, averaged 85 in the twos, and I've got his job security as moderate, mid, because we haven't seen if he gets a game with Hewitt back in the team. However, having watched a little bit of his game, I think that he is good enough to hold his spot over a couple of the Carlton wingers. Lachie O'Brien comes to mind. I think Lachie O'Brien might be dropped and Carroll played out on the wing if he's got the tank for it. Lachie O'Brien, I know he's a great runner, so if Carroll can play wing, I think he'll play ahead of O'Brien. Otherwise, it'll be interesting to see if maybe they play him off forward flank. Jackman's just gone down, so he could slot in there, play as a high half forward around the stoppage. Predicted average 65, not quite as high as the other guys, but he moves pretty well, gets in space, makes good decisions, and he's a good kick. So they'll look to get the ball in his hands, and he looks like he can win it himself. Gets him to 570k, profit of $285,000. I've got him a little bit behind McComb because I've got a little bit more doubts about his job security and his scoring potential, whereas McComb has averaged 100 in the twos. So you got to take that. Fourth, I've got Cooper Hamilton from GWS. He's a mid-forward, but he's playing in defence. He's an elite runner. Broke the Giants 2-kilometre time trial first year. I think first time trial they did, he broke it. He runs it in about 6 minutes 40, which is unbelievable. 5 minutes 40, which is even more unbelievable. Kid can run. He works hard. He's got good hands, and he looks like a pretty safe kick. I think he's got high job security because I looked at the GWS injury list. Can't see anyone else really coming in for him apart from Josh Fay, their draftee from last year's draft, getting good numbers in the VFL. I haven't really watched any of the games, but he's a guy that they might want to get into the team, although probably not as locked down, more of a kicker, and they've got a good kicker in Isaac Cumming already playing down back. He's averaging 54 in the AFL, averaged 72 in the VFL. I've got him predicted average at 60. I think he'll get involved in a little bit of uncontested marks. And he looks like a hard worker, so maybe a few tackles. That gets him to about 500k, making $250,000 profit. Fifth, Maurice Rioli Jr, who's a mid-forward actually playing in the forward line, which is interesting. Not really. Hamilton's interesting. Rioli is as expected. He's priced at 32. He's averaging 65 points, boosted against the Weagles waffle team that they beat by 109 points. Averaged 66 in the VFL, which is remarkably similar to his AFL average. I've got his job security as very high. I haven't written very high. I've got it as high. But in my head, I'm thinking very high. I predict he'll average 55 from now on. Great tackler. He's one of those guys that doesn't look like he's playing with any intensity, until there's a moment that he can get involved, which is very deceptive to players. You wouldn't believe it. Here's Rioli. Cyril had a similar trait where it looked like he was sort of just jogging to a contest and the ball would bounce one way, opposition would get it, and in a flash, Rioli just takes off. So he doesn't waste any energy. But when there's an opportunity to tackle and put on pressure, he's there and he gives it his all. So Rioli will get lots of tackles, maybe even little hands with the way champion data record tackles. You just have to make contact with a player and stop an effective disposal. So I think he's going to get lots of those. A couple of goals too, but probably more tackles, little handballs and stuff. He's very clean. He's a Rioli. What more can I say? I've got him averaging 55, gets him to 460, and a profit of 190k, round 12 by being with the Tigers. Number 6, I've got Rory Thompson from the Gold Coast Suns. He's a defender, plays in defence, plays key defence. Not a very exciting player to watch, but maybe a guy that just provides a bit of a heartbeat on your bench in the defence. Round 13 by, which is good for the defenders as well. There's not many round 13 defenders. Priced at 24. You'd think he can exceed that. He'll be a bit of a slow burn. He's averaged 39. Only played the one game though. Averaged 46 in the VFL. I've got his job security is very high. I don't think he'll come out of the team unless he gets injured. Predicted average of 45, which gets him to 380. And a profit of $180,000, very similar to Sam De Koning, I think, or Tom De Koning. The Geelong De Koning, very similar, I think, but he's been a good rookie to have on the bench. Lastly, I've got Darcy Cameron from Collingwood. He's a forward, but he's been playing in the ruck since Brodie Grundy went down. He's 538k, makes him priced at 64, averaging 65, but the last 3, he's averaging 90. And in the 2s, when he played more ruck in 2019, he averaged 100. His job security is very high. I don't think he's going to go out of the team, but he might lose the main ruck role when Grundy comes back. But that, according to the reports, is still like 8 weeks away. So you can ride Cameron for a little bit. I've got his predicted average at 85, potentially pushing 90, but I think safely 85. He doesn't get a lot of hitouts. He wins about 29% of hitouts, I think, and most ruckers are around 45. Funny how even rucking turns out to be. But anyway, that gets his price to $712,000 with a profit of 174k. If you just look at the profit, you're probably thinking he's not a great option, especially compared to some of these other rookies. But if he can average 85, that makes him fieldable, and probably makes him a top 8 forward, at least for the extent that he's in your team. So I'm not going to do it this week. I might do it next week. If he puts up another 100, I probably will do it next week. Like a guy like Butters, if Butters doesn't perform, straight to Cameron and still making a profit. I want to see it again because he doesn't get many hitouts. He gets a lot of free kicks so watch for that. Probably just gets to the right spot, and the bigger, more seasoned rucks get frustrated, throw him out of the way, and he takes marks and gets a lot of tackles. So he's more of a fourth midfielder than he is a ruck, but he can take a good contested mark down the line. So not really like a midfielder at all. He just doesn't get many hitouts. That's what I'm trying to say. But, if you can pick him up now, discounted price, and he just does a job for you for 6-8 weeks, he could be a really good selection. Personally, I'm struggling with where I rank him, but I would probably have him second on this list if I was to put them in order. After Clark, I'm bringing in Thompson just because I've got Jake Stein, who's not playing anymore, and I need the cash to take Cornelio up to Zorko. But yeah, interesting. I think the Cameron move could be what separates the teams up the top end in the rankings from now on. Anyway, that dragged on a little bit, but I hope you enjoyed and got something out of it, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.